I recently watched the Paul Thomas Anderson film One Battle After Another. I was pulled in by the buzz saying that it was one of the best pictures of 2025. It is. It is memorable, it is different, it's original, and I found myself thinking about it for a variety of reasons way after it was over. I appreciated the way the story skewers both the political left and the right. The characters on both ends of the spectrum are just extreme enough to be ridiculous and just recognizable enough to lead us to wonder, oh, is that me? Among the many themes of the film, I want to talk about the representation of masculinity. First off, in terms of the main characters who are men, we have Sean Penn. Say what you will about his personal life, he's turned in a performance here as Colonel Lockjaw that is worthy of an Oscar nod. Now, Lockjaw is the epitome of a certain type of conservative man. He is masculine to the point of being a caricature. He is emotionally repressed and conflicted. He is a broken man whose only coping mechanism is to see the world through rigid, all or nothing lenses and to inflict violence on others. He desperately craves the approval of men who are richer and more powerful than he is. And he yearns to find a place among those men in the country clubs and the corner offices where they live and do business. Now, joining the circle of elite, and we should point out the circle of elite white men, is the capstone of Lockjaw's life. He is seeking essentially to justify his existence. Now, the secret society of powerful men that Lockjaw wants to join in the film is called the Christmas Adventurers Club. It's sort of a cross between the Illuminati, Opus Dei, and Knights of Columbus. On the one hand, the name is ridiculous, and it sends up the idea of such a group of, secret conservative Christian cabal of men running the world. This is a liberal boogeyman, and it deserves a silly name. On the other hand, when we consider the demographic and the type of people who do hold on to power and prestige in this country, and the way they hold on to it through formal and informal networks, the way that Christian nationalist groups want to do away with the separation of church and state, and the way they want to control society through the 7 spheres of influence: religion, family, education, business, media, arts, entertainment, and government. Maybe this farcical group doesn't sound so absurd. So the white men of the Christian Adventurers Club are mostly removed from strenuous physical labor, and this includes violence. These men have been so ensconced in their boardrooms and bunkers and country clubs so long that they have other people or the system itself to do their dirty work. For the most part. We'll come back to that. When they do kill and they do get their hands dirty, it's through hunting. Because why not? Nature and its bounty are theirs for the taking. So their home offices and secret bunkers are decorated with dead animals mounted as trophies. These men of high pedigree, they need Colonel Lockjaw for his experience of street-level law enforcement and military tactics. They need that to effect the change that they want. So they invite Lockjaw to apply for membership. But there's a hierarchy here, and we see it clearly. Lockjaw, the street officer and military commander, becomes kind of a bootlicker in the presence of these more powerful men, and his isolation of them is also emphasized in his wardrobe. He seems slightly out of place in his khakis and his off-the-rack blazer among these other members in the more bespoke brands. There's a ladder here, and Lockjaw, while above others on the street and in the military, is clearly at the bottom at this secret cabal, where he's just grudgingly tolerated. And there's a racial aspect to all this as well. Aside from the members of this group being all white men, to them, brown bodies are there to be used and exploited. On the one hand, these men want to keep their country and their ranks, their families, pure, unpolluted from people of color. In that sense, Lockjaw's experience hunting down undocumented people, very valuable. So long as it doesn't deplete the availability of brown bodies to do the work in the factories and the farms that the members of the Christmas Adventurers Club own. After all, that is how they make their money and wield their power. So layer this racial bit in with gender, and you get another wrinkle in Lockjaw's personality. Sure, he is a strict by-the-books military man. Sure, he yearns for the approval and company of white men. But he also has a complicated relationship with brown bodies, quite literally because he loves black women. Now, let's quickly dispense with this as real romantic love. It's not, he objectifies black women. There is an exploitive aspect to his relationship with black women as a means of sexual gratification. It's very obvious. It's more like a fetishization. In the case of the film, he's fixated on Profita Beverly Hills, one of the active and outspoken members of the underground revolutionary movement. Profita is also the love interest of Bob, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, who builds bombs and other pyrotechnics for the revolution. Profita is also Willa's mother, who Leonardo DiCaprio, or Bob, ends up raising as his own daughter. The names are all very telling. This is on purpose. Lockjaw literally walks around with a locked jaw. He's emotionally locked down, and you can tell he's on the verge of snapping from it. Profita, well, she'll later have some problems with being honest and truthful and faithful, as her name foreshadows. Her second name, Beverly Hills, the epitome of bougie, hints at a nature that might be more conflicted about the cause than she lets on. Her daughter, Willa, we will see, is a willful and courageous young woman, so her name tracks as well. The prologue of the film introduces us to Profita. She comes off as an outspoken agent of the revolution and the liberation it promises. But we also see she's very much in love with power. Power literally gets her off. We see her in her most sexually aroused around weapons and violence and explosions. A scene where she holds Lockjaw at gunpoint and immediately becomes sexual. As she watches Bob construct bombs, she gets sexually aroused. When the bombs detonate, and she'll end up begging Bob to have sex with her on the spot while the bombs are going off in the background. It's this fixation on power that will get Profita entangled with Lockjaw. And visually, we see this too, because when we see her in the film, the first time we see her, she is wearing military fatigues, as if to visually cue us in her own cosplaying at military-style strength. It shouldn't be lost on the audience that the man that Profita murders during a bank robbery gone wrong is a black man. After Profita of Beverly Hills is captured by the police and faced with prison time, she turns into a betraying rat to her and turns in her friends and turns on her cause. Ironically, Profita comes to resemble the white men of the Christian Adventurers Club, becoming a force of violence towards brown bodies, not a force of liberation. Now, let's talk about Leo's character, Bob, a man with a forgettable name. In Bob, we see a man on a different journey and on the other end of the political spectrum from Colonel Lockjaw. When we're first introduced to Bob in the prologue, he's a man of action, guided by his principles that align with the revolution, that lead him to building bombs and being adjacent to other acts of violence. The shift for Bob comes when Willa, his daughter, is born, and there is the prospect of becoming a family with Willa and Profita. But Profita is not suited for caregiving or nurturing. She puts her needs aside for no one. In this sense, she's more like Lockjaw, narrow, focused on her own needs and advancement. Other people are just means to an end, and those means are discarded when they are no longer useful to her. Through her turning into a witness for the state, a rat, Profita and Lockjaw continue to be entangled. And that's all in the prologue. These are really not spoilers. It's the setup. So after Profita disappears into witness protection, Bob falls deeply into his role as sole protector, provider, and nurturer for Willa. This goes on for 16 years, where the real action of the film actually begins. The movie does not disguise the fact that Bob has become, in those 16 years, a stereotypical sad dad. He spends his days in his bathrobe. He drinks and drugs too much. He is in touch with his feelings, sort of. He cries, but he doesn't feel connected to anything, really. He still can espouse the rhetoric of the revolution as he does at a parent-teacher conference, but his passion is gone. It seems like he's going through the motions. He's a new age sensitive guy, but he seems kind of neutered when we see him at this point in his life. In a word, Bob is kind of emasculated. Figuratively, he's impotent. Who knows if he's literally impotent? For marketing purposes, some of the trailers for the film made Bob's character out to be like some kind of action hero. But the film makes very clear that aside from raising Willa into a great daughter, whom we recognize as the real protagonist of the movie, Bob does absolutely nothing useful in this story. Bob is one step behind the whole time. Any credibility Bob does have in the present day, it's from his exploits in the past, from his associations with the revolution. He's very much like the middle-aged man who is reliving his glory days of high school sports well into his 40s. Because Bob's done nothing interesting in his life since. Yes, Bob has been a great caregiver, but like so many women, as his child has grown up and become a young, independent woman, needs him less, Bob's life lacks direction. Caregiving cannot be his sole identity, any more than it can be the sole identity for many women. And to think that it can be the sole identity for anyone shortchanges any mom or dad of their true potential. It's not like the movie doesn't present an archaic version of femininity either. We do see women reduced only to their role as caregiver. They are there just to serve men's needs, and we see this in the form of one of the wives of the Christmas Adventure Club's members. Fittingly, she is in a completely subservient, dehumanizing role, offering the one thing she seems to be known for to Tim Smith, one of the corporate baddies in the film, and members of the Christmas Adventurers Club. She offers him her special, famous pancakes. Her identity is reduced to being a cook, seeing to the men's needs. That's all. No more agency than that. So the film presents us with these two extremes of masculinity, Colonel Lockjaw and Bob, both recognizable as men who we'd imagine on the red, blue, conservative, liberal sides of our political spectrum. So with these two chewing up the scenery, you could almost be forgiven for missing the exemplar of a balanced masculinity, an example staring us right in the face throughout the film. It's Benicio del Toro's character, Sensei Sergio St. Carlos. We're introduced to Sergio as Willa's martial arts instructor. In that role, in that name, we already see him coded as a man who can utilize violence when needed, but we don't see him use it. We don't need to. Sergio is confident in his power, his identity, his masculinity. He does not need to flaunt it. As we see in all the symbolic names of the film, Sensei Sergio St. Carlos tells us a lot about what we need to know about this character. He's not just a warrior, but a wise and balanced one, as we gather from Sensei. Sergio is a name that means servant. It also reminds Anglo-Saxon speakers of the rank of sergeant, with the same root, to serve. Not to be too much on the nose, but all these names are, Sergio is a servant leader. And his last name sort of gives us the filmmaker's opinion of that. He is a saint for it. And all that tracks for what we see of Sergio in the film. We see that Sergio's power is in his relationships. He moves seamlessly through the city, even at a time of chaos, mostly in thanks to his connections within the community. We see him teaching and mentoring Willa. We can infer that he's doing this with other young people from the way that those other young people in the city at the time of the riots and protests, like the skateboarders, interact with Sergio. We see that Sergio is well liked by everyone who lives around him. In an almost comic scene, we watch Sergio move through a crowded home apartment building, connecting with and acknowledging, introducing his friends and family, and those distinctions between friends and family definitely blur. But we see him introducing friends and family to Bob. In these scenes, Bob is manic, he's nervous, he's lost. Unlike Bob, who during the day is drinking himself into oblivion in the secluded forest, Sergio is connected. He's loving others and he is loved for it. The contrast in their effects can't be more overemphasized. Bob is a mess. He's clumsy, he's screwing up one thing after another. He is completely ineffectual. Sergio, by contrast, moves with a calm demeanor. He's unflappable. He is poised. He's effective, effortlessly so. Sergio saves dozens of families and maybe 100 people through well-thought-out plans and a strong network, while Bob is struggling to make his radio work. Bob is a lone wolf who has no healthy way to handle his masculine energy. He no longer even has an ability to wield violence to protect others, which one might argue is a core masculine trait in some respects. It's significant that Sergio has to give Bob a weapon, a rifle. It's a moment rife with ritual symbolism that is lost on Bob. When it does start to dawn on Bob how Sergio has bestowed on him his chance to reclaim his agency, like everything Bob does, he screws it up. I'll leave the phallic analysis for the comments, but the symbolism is there. Bob parrots some revolutionary slogan, but his delivery is weak and pathetic, and his timing, like all his timing, is too late. And we should note, Bob never effectively uses that rifle throughout the entire film, which is probably also a commentary on his ability to wield his masculinity. At this point in Bob's life, you feel like he's cosplaying revolutionary. We can't take him seriously as an action hero, since he is literally running around the city in his bathrobe. But to be frank, he's not really that different from the weekend warriors cosplaying as military, who are chasing after teenagers with M16s. We can't look at the uniformed ICE agents of the film without thinking about the ICE enforcement agents flooding into our streets today. On the one hand, this film was prescient on these types. On the other hand, the agents of the film are much more professional and fit than some of the out-of-shape and sloppy men chasing bonuses currently offered by ICE. At least the ICE agents, at least the ICE agent jerks in the film also have the courage to show their faces. I actually have to give Leonardo DiCaprio credit for choosing this inept, impotent role of Bob, a man who is the embodiment of a living humiliation. He is nothing like Leo's earlier roles. His evolution is not into a leading man, but as I said above, a sad dad. He has no agency. He's even replaced by another man in the bedroom. Bob's redemption is, of course, his successful raising of Willa, but that's also significant that her name is a reminder of how Bill has lost his own will. But again, Bob's successful raising of Willa is mostly a prologue to the body of the story. We're left with a slightly ambiguous ending as well. We see that Bob has let go of some of his overprotection of Willa as he demonstrates a willingness to let her go out with her friends at the end and to even start using a cell phone. But the jury is still out on whether or not this is too little too late for Bob's moral redemption as a character. And the jury is still out on Willa, too. Sure, she demonstrates that she is a badass in the film, but it's not clear whether she will learn the lessons of the past and do things differently from her mother. The old revolutionaries are definitely wary of Willa because to her lineage, they acknowledge that her lineage brought ruin to them. And if you step back and look at things, Willa's actions, as well-intentioned, and even her deceptions, as well as attention as they are, bring ruin to the revolutionaries who were able to escape the first betrayal by her mother, such as Deandra and the Sisters of the Courageous Beaver. The film sort of elides this harsh fact in order to give us an uplifting ending, but really, because of Willa, the history of betrayal is repeated in this generational line. Bob and Willa, wrestling with the mistakes of the past and the possibility of repeating them, stands in stark contrast to Sergio and his progeny. Despite their hardships, as an audience member, you're much more confident that Sergio and his friends and family will survive whatever life has in store for them without complete self-immolation. Immolation being a key word when we consider Lockjaw's ultimate fate. And that is verdict enough on his choices and his morals and his model of masculinity. So that's my take on the film. Presented with different choices, we can be repressed, tightly wound, a bully like Lockjaw, sucking up to hierarchy, inflicting violence on others, objectifying women. Or we can be Bob, an emasculated man out of touch with his purpose, who's surrendered it, who's alienated from his community and even alienated from himself. We see in their emotional immaturity, their emotional stunting, how Lockjaw and Bob both end up being cruel to those different or weaker than themselves. Consider how Bob is so mean to Willa's friends, even while virtue signaling that he's woke. And it's clear that both these men stand for the extremes of our political identities today. Or we can strike a balance. We can be strong And we can be nurturing. We can be our own self while also being part of the community. That's Sensei Sergio St. Carlos, and that seems to be the promise of the movie, even if it's a bit pat and a bit on the nose like all the names. It's that in making that choice Sergio has made, we are more likely to find inner peace, even joy, as we face up to the structures of power that oppress us. We can literally dance through the chaos, as Sensei Sergio St. Carlos does, doing it in the last shot of him in the film, lifting his arms and swaying his hips to a beat only he can hear while the bewildered police officers try to force him to take a sobriety test. So that's my take. Preemptive apologies if it's a reductionist gender take or that you think I'm ruining a film by reading politics into it. I'll admit, trying to shoehorn a living piece of art into these frameworks always misses something. The fit is never perfect. But despite that, I do think there's something valuable at looking at the film through these lenses. But what's your take? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for listening.